Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collingwood for YouTube, and I'm here to continue my read along for the Dark Shadows Daybook, written by Patrick McCray and artwork by Wallace McBride. I am here. 1970 parallel time. 1970 parallel time. The abyss gazes back. Meanwhile, in the real world, many of the actors in the series were filming a Dark Shadows movie, which required the show's writers to create a relatively consequence-free alternate storyline that takes place in a parallel time, known as parallel time. Episode 985. Maggie thinks she's seen double when Angelique's twin sister arrives. But is she? Maggie Collins, Catherine Lee Scott. Maggie is stunned to find someone she assumes to be Angelique in her home. She is told that it's Angelique's sister, Alexis. But no one at Collingwood seems to shake the feeling that the former mistress has returned. Maggie and Quentin row over the new guest, and Maggie leaves. Best moment of acting on the show. Apologies to everyone else, and by the show, I mean all 1,225 episodes. Catherine Lee Scott and David Selby end the episode with a fury argument about whether or not Angelique has returned, or if it's really just her twin sister Alexis. There are moments in acting where but the actual moment of total communication completely vanishes. There's no planning, seemingly no script. The actor is as completely absorbed in the given circumstances and connection with their scene partner as is the most transfixed audience member. You might have heard of the concept of in the moment. Sounds pretentious. It isn't. It is a moment like this. Scott, in a show whose cast is filled with geniuses, easily competes for the center square, vastly culturally literate and perceptive about the nuances of human behavior. In her choices, she is also a hell of a chess player. She owns every moment when she is on screen. She is not one for accidents. The final scene in this episode combines that kind of creative ownership with a total artistic freedom that the writers of the show's procession usually deny the performers. It's normally about saying lines and hitting marks with an accuracy demanded by being live on tape with minimal preparation. It doesn't allow for that almost supernatural spontaneously this moment does. It's not just about raised voices and Selby's bombast. This is about actually being. It's often a mystery how these moments come about. Oliver wept after certain performances because he had no idea how he achieved them. When Scott departs Collingwood, you hear a voice never before experienced on the series. This is an edgy that is totally fresh, totally new, and totally about communication with Selby at that moment, and she means it. It goes by in a flash, but it's worth really appreciating. Overall, Parallel Time is one of the show's least effective storylines because of its failure to live up to the concept. Where does the universe debate? Where doesn't? Where don't they? The writers hid behind. This isn't science fiction. Too much with this. Nowhere is this truer than the moment when Cyrus quotes Shakespeare. Why not attribute it to Marlowe? Guys, have a little fun with PT concept. It's possible to have those Easter eggs as flavoring without being a slave to science fiction. It's a general rule that if you play to the dumbest guy in the room, you'll have the dumbest show in town. Given that, if you play to the most average guy in the room, well, you get my point. This episode focuses on the abstracts of good and evil, dedicatedly than most on the show, of course. Any Jekyll and Hyde story is apt to. I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'm not sure that Yeager is as much evil as liberated from the yoke of consequences. Why need he be? He's a tourist in Longworth's body. He exhibits too much joy. Longworth too little. I can see scenarios where he has a great weekend in New York, as long as no one gets in his way. If there's a monster in the episode and in all of PT, it's not Angelique, nor Stokes, nor Yeager, nor any of the ostensible objects on a primal level. It's Quentin, that most violent of good guys' husbands. The only thing that strains my credulity in the episode is that he doesn't slap Maggie into next week. Not that he should, but with a temper that volcanic and self-assured, in an age where that's the way things were, I feel like P.T. Quentin is cutting short of where he really seems to want to go. It's an he's an unreasoning, privileged, overly confident bully with an anger management problem that is more readily found in kaiju. And that, my friends, is a monster, because that monster is real. The most astonishing other element in the episode is that Maggie actually leaves him. That is the fantasy element of the series, because too few victims of domestic abuse find Maggie's strength. Dark Shadows wasn't an engine of social inspired by her example. An engine of social change. Sorry, I skipped a line. But in this one instance, I can only hope that someone out there was inspired by her example. And what am I saying? Day ain't over yet. Perhaps someone is being inspired right now. No Quentin is worth it. I agree with that. Episode 996. What has black hair, a bushy mustache, and swings a mean sword cane? Parallel time. Meet your new best friend, John Yeager, Chris Peanock. Cyrus transforms into the giddy, roughhousing Swinner, John Yeager, who immediately goes to the Eagle to romance Buffy in the process. He deals with his romantic rival, Steve, with extreme prejudice. When he offers to pay for the damage with one of Longworth's checks, Buffy drops a dime on him to Quentin. Yeager is well aware of the betrayal, however. April 13th is a significant day for me because It's not only the day they taped episode 210, where the iconic hand of Barnabas Collins shot up to grab the 20th century by the throat. It was also 1 year before I was born. But by that time, 1971, Dark Shadows had been off the air for 11 days. I was 11 when I saw Dark Shadows for the first time. That was in January of 1982. It was very much of a different world from 1967 or 1970, betrayed by hairstyles and hemlines, and yet as adults are cursed to do, I will tell you what you may know better than I. 11 years is nothing. The show had only been off the air for 11 years. 11 years ago from tonight, Barack Obama was president. We had iPhones. Marvel movies were coming out. One. Anyway, Daniel Craig was still James Bond. It doesn't seem that long ago. And 996 features a performance and an intervention of a classic character that are both shockingly modern, ahead of 1970, of 1982, and maybe of 2020. April 13th, I can think of a few better ways to spend the day than with Chris Pennock. With episode 996, we do, and how. It's the first time we see John Yeager flex his muscles on the fullest sense from the get-go. Although the makeup is more Goulet than Ghoul, this is no ordinary performance. How much was Joe Caldwell? How much was Chris Pennock? Inseparable. Dark Shadows has a rich history of improving the classics. Thank you very much, as they reinterpreted vulnerable text for a post-modern era. The original authors, Shelley, Stoker, Wilde, James, Stevenson, etc., certainly had the edges of and luxuries of poetic language and originality, but with the edge of originality also comes the myopia of having to do this now, with no time to let decades and culture mull over the ideas in context. Essentially, those original authors were beta testing their ideas. The James Wells, Jimmy Sangsters, and Dan Curdy were perfecting them for the wide release to the public. Good, evil, so clear for Victorians and Edwardians, where sun never set, whose racial superiority was axiomatic, and who didn't have the troubled tandem that was the 20th century. Yet under their belts, the Jekyll and Hyde concept is now post-Fraud and Company. Just weird. Richard Matheson fired the first shot with The Enemy Within, wherein both the good and evil sides had as much to recommend them as to condemn. Pennock and Caldwell take this even further. Given Dark Shadows its most philosophical and dramatically elaborate moment, sadly stuck in a storyline that is, babysitting the audience because we got a movie to make, people look alive. Maybe that was a good thing. Maybe they couldn't have gotten away with this if Uncle Dan were at home, or if drug culture had not yet been totally villainized. And someone tell Cary Grant to give up his source. When we meet John Yeager, he might not be what we think of as conventionally attractive, but he's also not the semi-simian grotesque that March Cagney and the other guys became. The early hides were childlike. Jaeger is a cocky young man in full, when women tell you, well, tell me, not to be nice. What they're really saying is not to be too reliant on their validation. John Jaeger is an army of self-validation. No self-doubt. It's not the opinions of others don't matter, but they don't seem to matter more to him than his own. Okay, yes, he beats Steve mercilessly, but Steve is no prize and is grabby. Did I skip a page? I think I almost did. Give me 1 second, guys. There we go. Way with the biscuit hooks. Elizabeth would not exactly fly under the flag of #MeToo. Uber Alice. This is redneck on redneck action. And I say, let the boys duke it out. Which is actually my way of saying that Jaeger was not unprovoked. When he comes to life, it is with as much joy as malice. He is the continuum of human reaction. And say what you will, he's honest. As I've noted before, it's hard to tell what Jaeger would be like if things went his way. I imagine a pretty fun guy. Similarly, if he sensed true loyalty, he'd probably be the kind of dodged advocate everyone wants in a friend. The problem with Jaeger is not that he's too much of anything. The problem is that everyone else is too little. If everyone took a dose of Longworth number 5, he'd be on a level playing field. I'm not so sure he'd go nuts at that point, because, well, as Robert Heinlein imagined, in some cases an armed society is a polite society. Until then, well, there are few actions of his that we can reasonably commend. We can still get a giggle or more from the spirit as for the execution. Again, perhaps this is only a performance that you can get away with when the boss is in Terrytown. If there's anyone whose empathic sense of conflict realizations might meet its match with John Jaeger, it's Dan Curtis. Am I the only one who sees this? Episode 1001. What's better than Laura Parker? 2 Laura Parkers. Dark Shadows is seen double in this very special episode where Angelique inaugurates her new life by beginning a spree of murder, malice, magic, and mirth. Chris Collins, Dawn Briscoe. Angelique rises from the grave, draining Alexis of her life energy, exchanging clothes with her, and consigning her to the coffin. To take her place at Connellwood, Cyrus begins changing spontaneously into Jaeger as Quentin moves to destroy what he thinks is Angelique's body. Dark Shadows passes its 1000th episode, and with no more milestones left, it slides into entropy, a perspective only possible when seeing the series as a whole. To put the division of the story into perspective, it has 224 episodes left. That's only a few more than carried the story between Vicky's arrival in Collinsport and the unleashing of Barnabas. 200 after that moment, well, find ourselves in the thick of the great man's origin in 1795. The end of the next 200 brings Barnabas to the height of his struggle to reclaim his core goodness. Through both working for and fighting against Nicholas and Eve, seeing how easily his second self, Adam, falls from innocence to malevolence, the eventual triumph makes a proper midpoint for the series. And over the next 200, our first hero, Vicky, leaves, and Barnabas enjoys the full height of his power before having it taken away. The journey to episode 1000 will lead to his complete immobilization in parallel time. While the series builds the necessity for him to stop running in the final arc of the series, he realizes, like Dorothy Gale, that he has lost nothing. A good man forced into the service of evil doesn't become evil. In the right circumstances, he finally stops seeing himself as the man who was defeated by his own past and recognizes that the future is eternally unwritten. Then it's all 1841 parallel time, and we all know how that is. Am I right? Am I right? And how about that airline food? What's up with that? Here's a joke. Jim Pearson told me over a curling match in an Irishman, Estevan, and a Leviathan walk into the Blue Whale, and the bartender says, Aristide can stay, but only if the caretaker gets to watch. 1,000. That's pretty good. 1001 is about unholy twins, Angelique and Jaeger, taking place. Episode 1001 is about an unholy twins, Angelique and Jaeger, replacing the rightful host. The horror here is Dark Shadows is at its most meta, because what else is parallel time but an unwelcome substitute that seems interesting on the surface but leaves us like Barnabas, a chained prisoner who's beginning to fear that this sinister duplicate might never leave. On some level, the writers had to be aware of that, even if they were never spoken out loud. And before that sounds like a catty strike at the show, think about how that tight audience identification helps the overall story. Dark Shadows begins as the saga of someone seeking a home, but it never quite takes, does it? Barnabas refashions his house over and over again, only to lose it over and over again. In the case of parallel time, he thinks he's found a better home, only to realize that he should have valued what he had in the first place. Even if it smells like Teen Jeb, like that, perhaps he should have also, but once he realizes that it's too late when he returns to Collinwood, it is already a smoldering hulk he failed to save before he even gets the chance. Dark Shadows is a rampant with twins, doubles, and alternate sides, of course. Any drama is actor versus part, and none more than those in which we follow performers taking on parts so numerous that we stop identifying roles and simply note the actor beneath as the real character. We follow, but PT is literally the show's twin born, while the crew is creating yet another twin for the big screen. As we see Angelique take over for Alexis and John Lounge Hulk Jaeger burst out of Cyrus of his own violation, the show feels like it is finally being honest. Twins are eternally nightmares. If they are worse than us, we dread their potential havoc and implication. If they are better than we are, we dread them even more. We've been fighting to maintain our optimism. While the show grinds away, and just when it's wise to give up the evil twins, at least get over with and assume the places of good, PT thus earns its place. It's not a second home, then as a providing ground for Barnabas to see who he really is. Laura Parker's doubled performance, timed exactly, allows her to demonstrate range like few other moments. Granted, to only actor on the show, she's at her most menacingly fierce, so much that we see glimpse a strange rage boiling under the skin of a Memphis debutante who's escaped the South, but not quite the 1960s. It's a performance that, sure, what the hell, it's acting, but it's acting with a realism more easily interpreted as real. Parker here represents what makes the show so vital, and what makes her so vital to the show. It is the fashion of impossible beauty, impossible knowledge, and impossible rage that fascinates us, frightens us, repels us, and makes us unable to turn away. One veteran not to survive this moment is Don Briscoe. It's his last haggard, exhausted episode. Briscoe remains a paragon of gentle magnetism and relatability. He's what we'd like to see in ourselves, and somehow that guy snuck onto the set. His presence, even as a villain, was immediately reassuring that we inexplicably but clearly had a friend at Collinwood. He was holding a place for us at the table, not as rustically macho as Burke, nor as neurotic as Willie. Briscoe was the truest audience surrogate on the show. It's a colder show and world without him. Episode 1011. Yeager unchains the coffin in the cellar for a laugh. Willie Loomis thinks that he can control the situation. Barnabas Collins has news for both of them. Barnabas, Jonathan Frid. Yeager stumbles upon Barnabas's coffin, but is knocked out before he can open it. After Yeager escapes Loomis's house, Will decides that it's time to move the coffin to the secret room upstairs, and wakes Barnabas to help along the way. Barnabas rhapsodies about Josette, lulling Will into a note-taking frenzy. This provides the opportunity he needs to knock Will out and regain his freedom. A year ago, the show was capturing the attention of a nation. A soundtrack LP and a Viewmasters that were taking their places alongside Batmobiles, stacks of Tiger Beat, and Major Matt Mason figures in a bedroom across the country. A movie, did you hear that? A freaking movie was coming soon to the Monoplex near you. It was about the summer vacation for the first time since 1897. And that's what it felt like, too. No more running home from school. No, the day could be centered on Dark Shadows with its proper places. As school, it was a tough winter. It was raining Leviathans and Brunos. They tried making Barnabas a bad guy again, but it didn't take. But summer was coming. The show had to do something worthy of the season, or vanish into whatever was on the other channels. Barnabas had been in the coffin for too long. Change was in the air. My friends, we've come home. St. John of Jaeger. I call the Liberator, sorry. Thanks, you monobird freak. I say that as a high compliment. I hate to label anything led by Laura Parker and David Selby as the product of the B team, and it must be understood that I mean it only chronologically in terms of casting dates. There are a B team and an A team not led by Colonel John H. Smith. The B team had two disadvantages for too long. A thumb-twiddling storyline designed to be unrelated to Prime Universe, and no Barnabas to tie us to continuity. He is our surrogate in parallel time, and without him, what we've been watching is right on the cusp of questionable relevance. In the end, parallel time without Barnabas is a story we politely indulge, the way we watch a boring but stately movie at the bedside of an elderly relative who had never seen it, and they agreed it was boring, but by me it's too late. 1011 is designed for two audiences. For patient viewers who have waited for Barnabas to return, it rewards them with a returning vampire who's alternately vulnerable, fearsome, and still has time to give us more Josette monologue for the road. Viewers have stayed away until Jonathan Frid returned after their other demographic, and they're brought into the show with a bang. Look at Will Loomis and his most desperate reminding us why Barnabas has been chained. Look, it's John Yeager repeating his basic motivations before retreating into Cyrus Longworth, bringing us up to speed on that. More interesting than what's going on at Collinwood. Yes, but we can face the truth more easily once we've seen Will get the tables turned. Barnabas rise and Chris Peanock meeting Christopher Peanock. Elvis may have left the building, but Barnabas has returned, and no one's TCB's better. Let's try not to skip the page. Okay, sorry. Episode 1012. Barnabas Collins turns parallel time upside down when he masquerades as the fiery fruit of his own loins, parallel ghost of Joshua Collins, Louis Edmonds. Barnabas turns the tables on Will and enslaves him after meeting the parallel time Quentin. With the Latin American version of his English branch story, he visits Collinwood to help investigate the portal room to his own time band. There, he and Quentin see Dr. Julia Hoffman. This show crackles with more energy than it has had since Vicky returned. Then, 1795, House of Dark Shadows finally finished. The cast reunites with a satisfying symmetry that makes us realize exactly what we've been missing. Not only that, but at long last, we learn the real secret of Barnabas Collins. Captain's log, Barnabas is back in every sense. Vampire, heroic protagonist, confident and cruel towards those who earned it. He begins by savoring the power he has over his former captor, Willie Loomis. The vampire's new target could easily wind up in the coffin himself, and would last for considerably less time. It's the first time we've seen him with such bravado since before the Leviathan sequence. Perhaps he just takes to travel. He's happy to use his powers when away from home because this is all a rental anyway. Not that he's reckless. He runs crosswise to the laws of With great power comes great responsibility. Barnabas is the embodiment of Collins' corollary. With great power comes great skepticism. Most people view a certain gentility as few cowardice. Perhaps it's just plain old wisdom. The more extreme the action taken, the more information you're obligated to have before taking it. Run through the series once or twice and the story seems to be about forgiveness. But let's wind that backward one step. What are we forgetting? Taking action before all the facts are in, not looking before we leap off Widow's Hill. Did Barnabas contend that he might actually be in love with Angelique before teasing her with a thrust? Did Barnabas, an admittedly bad shot, consider that he might not kill Angelique when he fired his flintlock at her? How she might retaliate? What about trying to propel himself into parallel time, with only a passing knowledge of that brave newish world of theirs? The whole kidnapping of Maggie thing, that one left a mark. Now, not that it always a weakness, his willingness to take risks while terrified is also his great strength. Chain trances, smashing the equipment in the lab and sending Nicholas back to hell, willing himself through time, in 1976, despite Julia's nagging. These are things he has to do, but he's learning to know when those times are, whether he's rife with the exercise of 1790's aristocratic privilege, or the savage capacity for the vampire to capture, control, and consume. The Barnabas we know is rarely as powerless as he seems. He's often caught between regretting drastic actions while feeding the mundane. What's changed? Nothing except for weeks of encapsulated captivity at the hands of Will Loomis. For the second time in his life, he's thrust back into a neurotic womb. When he emerges in 1967, it's with the madness that comes from facing the inescapable darkness alone. In parallel time, he's not alone. He has Will's incessant inquiries to give him purpose and a reason to plan revenge, and he has the nature of Will's questions. For the first time, he has the involuntarily of blood-starved peace and quiet to examine the lives he's led. Will gives him no choice. He also gives Barnabas a sounding board that roots him in the real world, whereas before his coffin time sent his mind fun-housing inward. If anything, this is the final climb outward. Upon his escape from Will's capture, his transformation is complete. Will asks if he thought of transforming Josette, and it's as if that one question focused the world for Barnabas Collins for the last time. Barnabas secures Loomis in a cage of intimidation, shakes Quentin's hand, stares down parallel Angelique, and teams up with the head of the household to solve the mystery of the portal room, all within 15 minutes. No wonder the show felt so jarringly fast from this point. Until it would leave the airways, it finally had a main character who could not only act, but who knew when to do so. Jonathan Frydd's return is desperately welcomed, not just because we miss him, but because the ensemble feels right. At long last, Quentin does so little in the primary time present seeing him alongside Fred, flanked by Laura Parker and Grayson Hall and Will Loomis, just a set away, is what Dark Shadows is all about. The arguably failure of House of Dark Shadows becomes clear. Here, Parker and Selby are phantom limbs we sense with a subconscious panic when they are missing. Without them, Barnabas must be his own foil on his film's own villain. It was written precisely so that someone could mind the store while the rest filmed the movie. In that time, something was missing in the alchemy of both shadows, whether on TV or in widescreen. It was the chemistry of the show. Not was there when it started, but what they found. Sorry, not what was there when it started, but what they found from that point of departure. They are reunited with a new Barnabas for the first time all over again. The show, at long last, will never be what it was. Revisiting established plot elements is not just an interesting option, it's the only option. It's a test, and it's one that Barnabas may actually finally pass. It's both the low and the high point of an episode of High Points, and it is one of the rare points that the forgettable theatricality of the show begins to buckle. When Kramer gets a better portrait than Maggie Evans Collins, it's time to sit down with the art department to tell them that you're sorry for being away so long shooting the movie, and that you promise to take them with you the next time. Do the right thing. Guys, check out this artwork before I... Check that out. Check that out. That is so cool. Check that out. Alright guys, when I come back tomorrow night, look where I'll be. 1995. Guys, if you haven't gone and picked this up yet, link is in the description box. Written by Patrick McCray, artwork by Wallace McBride. I'm enjoying the hell out of this. I can't wait to give my overall review of it. Fantastic book so far. I mean, but again, 1995 tomorrow night, guys, for this. You guys have a great night, and I'll see you tomorrow night. Bye-bye.